one other thing before, so tonight is 7 o'clock start. Tomorrow night, Friday night is 7 o'clock start. Saturday evening is 6. So just 7, 7, 6. I think we'll pray and I'm ready. Father God, we thank you for tonight. And thank you, God, for this time. And you invested a lot into your children in the Old Testament and into their lives and into just different things about that. And I just pray, God, that you be with Lester tonight as he teaches here and just bring things to his remembrance. And I just pray that you could draw us to yourself, God, just through understanding things here. And we just pray that this year would have free reign. And we ask this that you guide us here tonight. Jesus, we pray in your name. Amen.
Well, it's certainly a delight for me to be here. And thank you so much for such a warm welcome. Yes. And I think maybe next off the cuff, I think there's a guilty person in the audience here this evening. The very reason that I'm here, and probably none other than Krista herself. I think she's the one that made some I don't know, whatever. But here we are. So you're going to have to, depending on how it turns out, you can talk to her. If it's good, talk to her. If it's bad, talk to her. That's it. In my native state of Michigan, it was not uncommon. Occasionally, the lakes would freeze over, totally freeze over. And so what they would do is they would send a big ship with reinforced metal up front to go in there and break up this ice so that the other ships could come by with their cargo and accomplish things. The interesting thing is that phrase, icebreaker, has then been, transposed upon social gatherings, and we use this term, icebreaker, and why we're breaking ice, there's no ice around, but we use this term, icebreaker, to, as a means or a tool to kind of break the formalities and get that behind us. So the icebreaker this evening is, are there any people out there that know they are between the age of 8 and 15? How many are out there between the age of 8 and 15? And if you are, could you stand this evening? Between the age of 8 and 15. Okay, several out there. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming this evening and bringing your parents along. That's great. But I have a little task for you, okay? And that is several things. Sometimes those parents, you know how they are. They're supposed to be in church and supposed to be paying attention, but they pull out their bulletin and they start scrolling, looking through the bulletin. And you guys aren't like that, so thank you so much for coming. And another thing, sometimes these days, you know what? These days, and I've seen it these days, some of those parents, they come with their smartphones and they're scrolling through the smartphone in church, and they're looking for and doing texting in church, So throughout this weekend, if you see those parents doing that, you can tell them, put it away, and I chose the ages, 8 to 15, because you know how those 16-year-olds are. They get their license and then they think they're big stuff, and then they go on and they get their 18, they get to 18 and they graduate from school, and then they think they're even bigger stuff. And then some of them go on and get married, and then some of them, you can't tell them anything. But thank you so much for coming, because I know you're so attentive and you're just here and eager to learn. And so hopefully we can have a good time together this evening. Okay. Then one more thing. I really do. I would like to look. I'm looking for 4 volunteers, maybe from this group. If you come to the Seder Saturday evening, there's a part in the Seder where there's a response from the younger generation. So if you would respond, this is Plan A. If Plan A doesn't work, I can assign it. In Plan B, I can assign it to someone. But if you would want to volunteer, I just got a little slip of paper for you to read at some place in the Seder. Other than that, you may be seated. And again, thanks so much for coming. And do keep an eye on those parents, keep them in mind. Thank you so much. I was thinking about, boy, just where do you start? And if you're not aware, my focus these days is going to be on the feasts of Israel, or the feast of the Lord, and then including the Seder on Saturday evening. And I'm not sure what kind of a connection you have to the Amish world, but this one comes from the Amish world, and that is that there was this itinerant bishop, Amish bishop, who was just renowned for his ability to just kind of drag on and on and on and on and on. And he was in town, or in the community, and he got up that morning to preach. He was kind of rubbing his hands, and he said in Dutch, he said, I just don't know where to begin. This one little Amish boy at the back of the corner there, knowing how he just drug on and on and on, he said, piped up and said, well, somewhere close to the end. So by your laughter, is that what you're saying here this evening? You want me to start somewhere close to the end? I would like to start somewhere close to the beginning. And so, again, are you there? I'm going to be presenting some concepts and some ideas about I think I'm choosing to call them the feasts of the Lord. And throughout the weekend, I believe I'm going to make a little bit of a twist there in terms of these feasts and what they mean. Again, this is kind of a panorama of all the way from Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Feast of Weeks, Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, Yom Kippur, and then Tabernacles. Now, the deal is that there are certain things that fascinate my mind, and this is one of them. I am keenly aware that not everyone out there is going to be fascinated by the feasts. I'm aware of that. And so I'll do my best to get you as bored as quick as possible, so then I can focus on those who are interested in the feast. And so I'll do what I can, maybe to try to keep your attention through these sessions. Again, are you there? We're going to be talking about Passover, unleavened bread, the first fruits, and all of that. So where to begin? Well, I would think, wouldn't you, that one place to begin would be with poetry. Why not? Certainly with poetry. And then if I ask the question, okay, how many of you out there enjoy poetry? Okay, several takers. Great. That's good. That's good to know. Poetry. But you know what? Poetry is one of the arts. And I am afraid that in our camp and in our world, we are losing appreciation for the arts. And I see I'm going to have a battle against this particular fixture back there on the wall. I'll do my best. Okay. Poetry. What do you know about poetry? Anything at all. And I'm going to hasten on because I need to. These lines, is that still kind of handed on to the next generation? So Mary had a little lamb, fleece was white as snow, everywhere that Mary went, lambs is sure to go. What are you hearing when you hear those lines? I think that this next line there. Again, what's happening there? What is poetry? Moreover, can I ask, what is Western poetry all about? What is poetry all about? As you know it, as you hear it, as you think it, as you say it, as you recite it, what is poetry all about? Telling a story. Painting a picture in your mind. But in terms of its function, hear this quickly, and I need to scramble. In terms of its function, I think it is rhyme and meter. It's rhyme and meter. And for you musicians out there, is this true? For you musicians out there, when you pick up that hymn, well, for everyone, when you pick up that hymnal and you are singing those hymns, and so there is a rhyme and a meter. A lot of rhyme, a lot of poetry in those hymns, but there's meter in there as well. And so that's the tension. And the tension is, again, between Western poetry and Eastern poetry is that basic tension. Western poetry, your poetry, operates with rhyme and meter. Hebrew poetry or Eastern poetry operates with thought content. It's about, we take this concept, we take another concept, we take this thought, we take that thought and compare it together, and we arrive at, can we say, the end or the conclusion. I found this one very interesting. Try that. Poetry, the greatest amount of meaning with the least amount of words. Very intriguing. And so poetry, again, I'm saying this now in relation to Western poetry. Again, greatest amount of meaning with the least amount of words. Again, traveling on quickly. And let me jump through some of these things. Okay, again, Western poetry, rhyme and meter. Hebrew poetry, parallelism. And it is rhythm and parallelism. Again, thought content. And this rhythm is advanced, or again, by balance, numbers. And so, in terms of the way it functions, the poetry, Hebrew poetry, again, focused on thought. And I'm trying to build a foundation here for the whole weekend. So, again, Western poetry operates with rhythm and meter. Eastern poetry, Hebrew poetry operates with thought content and parallelism. And so here we are. We take thought line A and thought line B and thought line C, and we compare them together in one way or another. And so here we are. We'll take, first of all, there's several different kinds of poetry, Hebrew poetry, beginning with one which is called stair step. And so what that does, again, we're comparing thought lines. For example, for the Lord is a great God. For the Lord is a great God, a great King above all gods. And so, again, we begin with the first line. For the Lord is a great God. He is a great King above all gods. Again, so it's a stair step. It's a rising. And we're comparing lines of thought. Secondly, it's antithetical. And this is not exclusive, all of the forms, but at least gets our thinking going. Antithetical. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. Way of the righteous, way of the ungodly. Okay, then a third, and this is the one I want to focus in on. And the third is called chiastic or chiasmos. What that does is, it's a chiastic form of structure, Hebrew poetry, which uses, again, thought content. And it begins with A and goes to B and C and D, and then recedes and returns to A. And for example, here we are. Thought content A, whatever the thought content is in A, and then goes to B, and then to C, and then to D, and then recedes to C and B and A. And so whatever the thought content is, it's kind of that arrowhead, that spearhead, where we end up in D. That is a central focal point in which the poet or the writer is focusing. That's what he wants attention. I failed to say at the outset in terms of the icebreaker thing that also, if you go to a synagogue, to a Jewish synagogue, and you participate or you observe in a Jewish synagogue, it's often when the scroll comes out is laid in the, what do they call it? There's a word for it. The bima. It's the podium in a synagogue. And then there is a cantor. A cantor comes up and will begin to read a certain section from the Torah, from the scroll. And often it's done with a stylus because you can't touch the scroll because the oils from your fingers might smudge the ink that's used on the scroll. And I'm sad I didn't bring my scroll along. I could have brought a scroll along, but I forgot it and left it home. So we'll have to do that next time, I guess. What I'm saying is, so they have cantors. The cantor is the one who comes up and reads. And so I would like to have some participation from the group this evening, and maybe throughout the weekend. A cantor is another one who can read the text. So if I call out a text, a reference, please, someone respond, and don't waste time so we can get along in doing so. All right, we want to take a look here at a chiastic structure, and that is in Mark chapter 11 and verses, let's do it here. 12 through 21. Who would like to respond and be ready with Mark chapter 11, verse 12 to 14? Back there, yes, thank you, Marcus, right? And then next, Mark 11, 15 to 19. Who wants to read 15 to 19? I guess right here, okay. And then following up with Mark 11, 20 and 21. Okay, Jaden, thank you so much. All right, we're going to watch this, again, because I'm building foundation for where I want to go with this thing in Leviticus. Okay, are we ready? And the rest of you either do, yeah, you got your copies open and you're going to be watching or reading along. Let's go and take a look here at Mark 11, 12 to 14.
Out them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of money changers and the seats of them that sold doves, and would not suffer that any man should carry any vessel to the temple. And he taught, saying unto them, Is it not written, My house shall be called of all nations the house of prayer, but ye have made it them ease. And the scribes and chief priests heard it, and sought how they might destroy him, for they feared him, because all the people was astonished. And when even was come, he went out.
And
As they passed by in the morning, they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. And Peter remembered and said to him, Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed is withered.
All right, so what is going on? Again, we have the content of the fig tree, and then the temple activity, the cleansing of the temple, and back to the fig tree. Okay, all right. So what is he saying? What is he doing? Again, essentially is saying, central message being the temple, essentially saying that the temple, your temple worship is as barren as this fig tree. And again, don't have time to expand upon that. And I just laid out here again very quickly. Once more, that's laid out in a chiastic structure, which is focusing on that the temple, again, that your worship is as barren as this fig tree. I use this as a tool because, you ready? Everyone ready? Chiastic structure of Leviticus. I find this intriguing. Now, please understand, I know there are a lot of things that intrigue my mind and fascinate my mind. It doesn't fascinate everyone, but it does me. Now, Jaden would probably sign up for study of the book of Leviticus. I don't know if many others would, but I think Jaden probably would, if he had a chance. Incidentally, both the study of the feasts and the book of Leviticus, the last two times that they were offered in my teaching career, zeroed out because no one signed up for them. So I ended up, I think it was about in 22, not teaching the book of Leviticus because no one signed up for it. And about 24, I believe it was, that I didn't teach this course on the feast because no one signed up for it. So I guess you guys signed up for it or something happened here. And so structure of Leviticus. So you think about Leviticus and say, oh, such boring and sticky and dry. Come with me. It begins chapter 1 through chapter 7. All right, is everyone there? Chapter 1 through chapter 7, Leviticus. We're talking about ritual sacrifices, about the sacrifices. I'm not going to unpack it. I don't have time. I'm not going to take time. And then we travel to chapters 8 to 10, and we're talking about the ordination of the priests, followed by chapters 11 and 15, and that is ritual laws and purity. Laws about ritual purity. And then we go to chapters 16 and 17, and we're talking about the Day of Atonement, or sacrifices. We go back, and we're talking about laws about moral purity. Ritual purity, moral purity. We're talking about qualifications for the priest, ordination of the priest, qualifications for the priest. And then finally, we're talking about ritual calendar, ritual sacrifice, ritual calendar. And what is that central focal point? What is it? Day of Atonement. So next time you find yourself bored reading through the book of Leviticus, think chapter 16. This is all building. It's a framework that builds and functions and upholds the Day of Atonement. We're all focused on the Day of Atonement. Let me do it one more time, and as quickly as possible, laying it out here. Again, now this Spitze, we say in German, or the peak, we say, is, again, that Day of Atonement. And so, again, we're going to circle in, and we're going to be focusing in on the ritual calendar, because that's, again, wherein we find Passover, unleavened bread, Feast of First Fruits, then the Feast of Weeks, and then Rosh Hashanah, the Day of Atonement, and Tabernacles, or can we say, I guess booths. I don't know if you heard anything about booths or tabernacles, and that's the last feast. But what is the focal point? The peak? Day of Atonement. Why the Day of Atonement? Why do we? What's the purpose of the Day of Atonement? Why the need for the Day of Atonement? What happens on the Day of Atonement? What's the purpose of the Day of Atonement? Why? Have you heard about the Day of Atonement? What's the Day of Atonement all about? Cleansing. Cleansing what? Your shoes? Tennis shoes? Do what? Sin? What's that? All right, people talk to me. I say wrongdoing. And think Old Testament. Think Old Testament. Can you give me some words? Give me some words, some definers of wrongdoing from the Old Testament. And they would be? Rebellion, okay. Iniquity, thank you. For those of you with a short memory, it was already just stated here previously. Starts with S. Sin, thank you. Could there be another one yet of some sort? All right, I'll do it. Transgression. Have you ever heard transgression? All right, let's lay them out. Iniquity, sin, and transgression. Iniquity, sin, and transgression. Now it's your turn again. Classify these. Which one is the most intense? Are they all the same? Or is there a difference? Is there a difference? Or are they all the same? And if there is a difference, what's the intensity? Is there a movement? Is there a greater, what's the word? Seriousness to these. Iniquity, sin, and transgression. You want to take a guess? You would classify them. 1, 2, 3. What would it be? That's a guess. Yeah. It's either the least or the most. Sin covers all? Okay. All right. I need to travel on. Here it is. Actually, I think I have them in order. First of all, iniquities, sin, and transgression. Iniquity, sin, and transgression. And we're going to jump over to the Hebrew now. Avon, chata, and pasha. Those are the three words that are translated. Again, avon as iniquity, sin, and transgression. I don't have time to unpack this extensively. But do you remember at all reading in your Old Testament, and occasionally you'll be reading along there, iniquity, sin, and transgression. Iniquity, sin, and transgression. Why not just say sin and be done with it? I think there's something going on there. Let me try this one. How many of you have heard about generational sins? Jaden, you got your hand up or down? Now, Gene, you and Marcus, I think, after I leave, you can set everything correct. You can set everything right. But can I say, I don't think biblically that there is such a thing as generational sins? Next time you're reading through the text, see if you find anything visiting the iniquities to the third and the fourth generation, not the sins. Interesting. Okay, let's do it. Here it is. Iniquity. Weakness or tendency to fall under temptation in specific area. Weakness or tendency to fall under temptation in specific area. Okay. Visiting the iniquities of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. So can I do it very simply? You know, the alcoholic father, well, it's his weakness. It's just so likely that the son may indeed be an alcoholic as well. You ever observe that? Hear that? Know about that? Sin, chata, violating God's principles and missing the mark. And thirdly, transgression, deliberately deciding, consciously choosing to violate God's principles and identify with the principles of evil in an open, clear act of rebellion against God. Now, here is where I'm going to burst your bubble. I have my own personal avon. But as Gene was saying, I was born up in the state of Michigan, so that's probably a disadvantage to start with. But I have my personal avon. I have my own personal weakness or tendency in specific areas. I'm going to tell you, I have advanced to number 2. There have been times in my life when I have violated God's principles and I missed the mark. Now, probably not so from people in Georgia or so, but coming from Michigan, it has occurred. But I truly would like to think I have not advanced to Pesach, where I have deliberately chosen to violate God's principles and identify with the principles of evil in rebellion against God. Although my heart is deceitful above all else and desperately wicked, again, I come from Michigan, I know that's a disadvantage, but it could just be that it might apply to people from Georgia as well. Oh, can I do this yet? I'm not going to hand these verses out because it's going to take too much time, but just let me say that I found it interesting. You know the storyline there in Genesis chapter 4, where God came to, let me just lay it all out because of time. God came to Cain, and he's talking with Cain, and it's back there in verse 4, chapter 7, verse 4, verse 7. He says, "If you do well, won't you know that you'll be accepted? And if you don't, sin lies at your door." Basically, he's saying, if you do well, won't it be well? But if you don't, violating God's principles lies at your door. And then we drop down there to verse 13. Cain's response, and Cain says, "My punishment is greater than I can bear." I'm not going to take time here to ask you what kind of copy, what version you bring to the service. But depending on your version, I'm not sure what it says. But King James says, and Cain said, "My punishment is greater than I can bear." I find it interesting that the word in Hebrew there is avon. My weakness and tendency in a certain area is more than I can bear. It's more than I can handle. And I would like to contend that's exactly where the enemy wants you. To think that your tendency, your weakness is more than you can overcome. And he's going to keep you there as long as he can. There is no temptation taken you, but such is common to man, and God is willing to make a way of escape. Your choice, Cain's choice, was to allow his avon to overcome him. And we know the rest of the story, and I need to scramble on. Again, transgression. Don't have time to say more about that. But they're all connected together. Now, notice, let's see, where are we now? In I want to lay some foundation here as well in terms of the backdrop to the Passover, to the Exodus and so, and taking a very quick look at Exodus chapter 40, and that is at the end of Exodus. In fact, actually, what's the book of Exodus about? Does anyone know what the book of Exodus is about?
The Exodus of Israel.
The Exodus of all things. Surely, yeah. But if we were to break that down just very succinctly into two halves, the first half, can I say that the first half basically talks about the Exodus, and then the last half talks about the building, the dimensions so of the tabernacle, building of the tabernacle, and let's go in chapter 40 there, and it says, then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. So what happened? They just built the tent, tabernacle, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And these are things that are just so fascinating. In Leviticus chapter 1, verse 1, for those of you who have Leviticus in your Bible, Leviticus chapter 1, verse 1, and the Lord called unto Moses and spake unto him out of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, so what's going on? Who are the players? Who are the players? Who's playing here? Moses, God, and the children of Israel. Okay, and so what's happening here? The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle, and what? It's right there. It's open book test. And the Lord called Moses and spake to him, and the Lord called Moses. Who's speaking? Who's playing? The Lord's speaking, called to Moses out of the tabernacle, saying. So what is it saying? Out of the tabernacle. Meaning, what's it meaning? I am here, you are not. Basically, I am holy, you are not. And then, there it is. I'm here, you're not. I'm holy, you're not. And then we go to Numbers chapter 1, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. Can you read that? In the tabernacle of the congregation. How did he get there? In the tabernacle. How did Moses get there? The book of Leviticus. Yes. All the holiness codes and all that was required there. Again, so don't say that the book of Leviticus is boring or it's not necessary. It's so foundational. In fact, just a little less than a year ago, October this past year, I was invited to a congregation in Southern Virginia, spent a whole weekend on the Levitical patterns of worship through sacrifice and the Mosaic law. And we talked about some of this stuff. Very interesting. And then I ended up just taking a quick note on the gospel in Leviticus. So fascinating. The gospel in Leviticus. I call it the Leviticus necessity. So again, we're still there. Leviticus chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. The Lord called unto Moses, spake unto him in the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, verse 2, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, if any man of you bring an offering unto the Lord, he shall bring an offering of the cattle, even of the herd and or of the flock. Again, who are the players? The Lord is calling. The Lord called. Who did he call? Unto Moses. You guys are good. Unto Moses. And said, oh, yes, good. You guys are so good. Speak. Speak to who? Children of Israel. It's open book. It's right there. It's right before you. Speak to the children of Israel. Meaning what? Saying what? I mean, what is this? What is this mirroring forth? What is this all about? The Lord called to Moses, the Lord to Moses, speak to the children. What is that saying? Fundamentally, it is saying, indicating the need for a mediator. Think New Testament and think Jesus. Think New Testament and think Jesus. Again, he is calling for a mediator. Again, the Lord called to Moses, and he said, Moses, speak to the children of Israel. And again, essentially laying the fabric, laying the foundation, laying the indicators that there's a mediator yet coming that is going to be greater than Moses even. In fact, next month toward the end of September, I go to a congregation in Virginia about the book of Hebrews. In the book of Hebrews, you know how that God, Christ Jesus, is greater than angels, Moses, Levitical priesthood. And so again, it's talking about a need for a mediator. Incidentally, let me insert at this juncture. I like definition of words and terms and so. Typical. If I say the word typical, what comes to your mind? Just as it is. Usual, or can we say frequent occurrence? As in, the Schwann's truck comes by our house every Thursday, except the Schwann's truck doesn't come anymore. I think they are not a thing, if I think of it. But typical, okay. For the rest of the weekend, unless I say differently, take that idea of frequent occurrence when I say typical and put it on the shelf. Leave it on the shelf. When I say typical, I'm saying this. This is so typical. It's a type and it's an antitype. Okay, are you there? So the type is that, again, God was calling to the Lord was calling to Moses, speak to the children of Israel, and indicating the need for a mediator. And now we're thinking Jesus. So again, type and antitype. And we might come back there when we continue on into the feast. And speaking about the feast, we've heard this, we've seen this word before, holy. You ever heard this word before? What does it mean? Say it again. You want an A for the day? You scored. Set apart. He would do well in the book of Leviticus study. I can see that. Yeah, holy. And I scramble. Holy. Kodesh. Again, and we find this, the first occurrence, again, depending on what copy you have, and I don't know what copy you have that you bring with you, he said to him, draw not hither, take off the shoes from off the feet, for the place whereon you stand is holy ground. So what makes it holy? Holy when you take your shoes off? Is that when it's? No? I said this before. I hope I don't get in trouble again tonight. But I said, when I would come home from work with my dirty mud boots or so, I would take them off outside and not track the mud across the kitchen floor, lest Janet becomes maybe a little unholy. No. Yeah. What is holiness all about? I'm only going to say swiftly in passing that in Exodus chapter 3 and verse 5, in King James text and or in the authorized text, that's the first time you're going to find the word holy. Okay? Draw not hither, take off the shoes from all the holy ground. Talking about holy ground. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 3. Lord blessed the seventh day and sanctified it because that he rested from all his work which God created and made. Sanctified it. If I think you have a copy, let's see, like maybe the English Standard or some other version, they will actually say, and God blessed the seventh day and holied it. And holied it. You may want to look at that sometime. We're not going to take time now to do so because of that device on the wall. But he sanctified it. So there it is. So again, holy, that's a good definition. Distinct from the common and profane. Separated, right? And again, what did God do? God took that seventh day and he kodeshed it. Let's see. For all of you scholars out there, what are you talking about when you say onomatopoeia? It's too hard to think about that one, right? Heard about that one before? Example? Swish. Right. Okay. Onomatopoeia. Yes. In Hebrew, Kodesh is onomatopoeia. Kodesh is Kodesh. It's like cutting it off, setting it apart. He took that seventh day and Kodeshed it, set it apart from that which was common and profane, or moreover, the primordial week. That is holy. And so the challenge comes to you, the challenge comes to me, the challenge comes to us. To what extent is your life distinct from the common and the profane? That's the question. To what extent is your vocabulary distinct from the common and profane? To what extent is your recreation distinct from the common and profane? To what extent is your wardrobe distinct from the common and profane? To what extent are your interests distinct from the common and profane? To what extent are your vacations distinct from the common and profane? You know, I think, as I used to do in my classes, I throw my hat into the ring first. I think that in our time and in our world and in our camp and in our house and in our tent, we just may be in need of a new infusion of an understanding of the holiness of God. I think that might be the case. But again, I know I come from Michigan, so I understand that. What does it mean to have a vision for the holiness of God? Again, Kodesh, cut apart, set apart, different from the common and profane. Again, and then he talks about the I am that I am. I think I'm going to skip over that. But here's the one, if you're interested at all, I'll probably reference this a bit more some other time, but here it is. We're now in Exodus chapter 6, verse 6 and 7. He says, wherefore, say to the children of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with a stretched out arm, with great judgments, and I will take you to me for a people, and I will be to you a God, and ye shall know that I am the Lord your God, which bringeth you out from the burdens of the Egyptians. Let me hasten to say, and we'll circle them if I can. I will bring you out. I will rid you of their bondage. I will redeem you, and I will take you for me as a people. I think indeed it may be very rabbinical, but these four phrases, and for I don't know if there are any ladies out here who are in process of preparing for the Seder on Saturday evening, but if that is the case, you may have seen some information about 4 cups of juice and or wine on the Seder table. These right here are the phrases, or can we say these are linked in. You go and experience a Jewish Seder, or ask any Jewish man, what are these 4 cups all about that you have on your Passover Seder? They will go right here. First one, I will bring you out. I will rid you of their bondage, number 2. I will redeem you, number 3. And I will take you for a people. Number 1 is the cup of sanctification. I will bring you out. I'm going to separate you. I'll bring you out. Number 2 is the cup of plagues. I'm going to rid you of their bondage. And then number 3 is the cup of redemption. And cup number 4, I will culminate in the redemptive process. I will take you to me for a people. Incidentally, I'll insert it now. And that is that it's an appetizer for Saturday evening. Does anyone remember reading somewhere? I think it's called the New Testament. Reading in the New Testament, something about, and supper being ended, he took the cup and blessed it and said, "Here, take and drink." That was the third cup. I think he may have used some cups before that, but again, begins with a separation, with a calling out, with a sanctification, and then progresses forward. And again, that third cup is the very intimate cup, and that's the cup of redemption. And then the fourth cup, and what does Jesus say? I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until I drink it new in my kingdom. Typically, all right, are you there? Typically, that fourth cup is not yet drunk in that case. In other words, Jesus did not fulfill in type, I don't believe, the fourth cup. That's when he's coming back and going to take us to himself, and we're going to be tabernacling with him for all eternity. Don't miss it. Now, simply an introduction to the feast of the Lord. Let me insert it at this juncture, and that is the feast of the Lord. I think I may have even done a misnomer when I had it printed in the catalog that I was teaching a class on the feast of the Lord or the feast of Israel. Oh, excuse me. The feast of Israel, I think maybe I would have said. Because we're going to see in the text, it says, these are the feasts of the Lord. Let me just say at this juncture, next time you are reading through the Gospel of John, it just may be that as you read through the Gospel of John, now the feast of the Jews was close by. Now the feast of the Jews was at hand. Now the feast of the Jews, the feast of the Jews, and the feast of the Jews. That is very interesting. You got your seatbelts on? There are those who say that John was referencing them as the feast of the Jews rather than the feast of the Lord. Are you there? Basically, what they are saying that he was saying is that these feasts have so degenerated that they were no longer the feast of the Lord, but they were the feast of the Jews. Did you read it? Are you there? So my question to you, have your services, have your feasts so devalued and degenerated that they are the feasts of, late grace, rather than the feast of the Lord? That's the question. That's the question. Our assemblies, are they the feast of the Lord, or are they the feast of us? And I think by nature, we tend to make these our feasts rather than the feast of the Lord. Let's see what we have here. Okay, there was someone one time that there was a preacher in, I guess, that maybe went over time a little bit, and they were asking him about that afterward, and he said, well, you know what? He said, my wife is such a good cook. And he says, when we have people over for Sunday dinner, and we have mashed potatoes sitting on the table, and they're still taking from the mashed potatoes, we don't take the mashed potatoes away. So I'm not going to take the mashed potatoes away for about another couple minutes. Is that okay? If it's after 8 o'clock. I want to scramble through this one, and then I will dismiss you, and then you can wrestle with Christopher even asking this guy to come. Oh, never mind. Okay. Very quickly. And the Lord, we're in Genesis 1:14. God said, let the lights that be in the firmament of the heaven be divided in days and the night, let them be signs and seasons and for days and for years. My question to you is, what do you think about when you think about right there, signs and seasons? Signs and seasons. Summer and winter. Thank you. Signs and seasons. Again, I would probably call these out, but I think for sake of time, I'm just going to jump into it. Genesis 8, verse 22. Signs and seasons. Signs, the word, Hebrew word is ot, and seasons is moed or moedim. And again, let's see. Let me just scramble through this. So, I think Genesis chapter 8 and verse 22, it says something about, seed time and harvest, cold and winter, and day and night shall not cease. That's over in chapter 8, after the flood. I'm going to contend that seasons as we know them come from chapter 8, Genesis chapter 8, verse 22, where it said, again, cold and heat, day and night shall not cease. And so back there in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, signs and seasons, I think we're talking about something else. And that something else is moedim, which is the word that is used. The Lord said, spake unto Moses, speaking to the children of Israel, saying to them concerning the feasts. The feasts. My seasons, or can we say my appointed times? Signs, meaning the sense as appearing, a beacon and or a marker in the heavens, in the heavenlies. Okay? And then seasons being an appointed time, meaning a fixed time, an appointment, a festival, and by implication, an assembly. How many of you like to be late to an appointment? You just like to be late to an appointment. How many of you, when you have an appointment with someone else, like for them to be late to the appointment? We might learn something else about appointments tomorrow evening for any of those who return. It's after 8 o'clock, and so it's back to Gene.
Thank you for that. And, I hope I can have that much energy. Good for living in. Been good to just process and learn. So, thank you, and we're getting started. Looking forward to more. Any announcements tonight? Anything? Maybe we'll just stand. I'm going to dismiss us for prayer.